There have been three NFL teams to finish the season without a single win: the 1976 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the 2008 Detroit Lions, and the 2017 Cleveland Browns. Today we're taking a deep dive into all three of them to answer one question: which of these teams was truly the worst in NFL history? But before we rank them, we need to understand why each of these teams collapsed in their own unique way. Starting with the first winless team in NFL history, the 1976 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who finished their expansion season 0-14. This team wasn't just bad, they were brand new. Tampa Bay was an expansion franchise thrown into the league with a roster built almost entirely from players who were either cut, overlooked, or past their prime. They didn't have a single starter with more than 10 years of NFL experience, and chemistry was basically non-existent, but their problems went beyond talent. Head coach John McKay was known for extremely demanding practices, including twice-a-day training sessions in the brutal Florida heat. Over time, that intensity backfired, leading to a wave of injuries. By the end of the season, the Buccaneers reportedly had around 17 players on injured reserve. So not only were they inexperienced, they were constantly depleted. Their worst loss came in Week 12 against the Oakland Raiders, a 49-16 blowout. Losing by 33 points, that game summed up their season. Overwhelmed, overmatched, and physically outclassed. Still, there is one major caveat. They were an expansion team. Struggling was expected. The question is whether that excuse removes them from the worst ever. Next up, the 2008 Detroit Lions, the first team in NFL history to go 0-16. Unlike the Buccaneers, this wasn't a brand new franchise. The Lions were an established organization, which makes their collapse even more shocking. This team did have talent. Most notably, they had rookie wide receiver Calvin Johnson, also known as Megatron, who would go on to become one of the greatest receivers of all time. But outside of him, the roster was deeply flawed. The biggest issue was the defense, arguably one of the worst in NFL history. They allowed around 32 points per game and constantly gave up big plays, broken coverage, and easy touchdowns. They also allowed over 6 yards per play, meaning offenses barely had to work to move the ball. Even in a league that favors offense, this defense was still historically weak. Their worst loss came in Week 16 against the New Orleans Saints, a 48-25 defeat, a 23-point loss. Despite the brutal season, the Lions did eventually find hope. They drafted Matthew Stafford first overall, who became a franchise quarterback and helped reshape the future of the team. So while the record is perfect in its failure, the context suggests a team that was broken but not completely devoid of talent. Finally, we arrive at the 2017 Cleveland Browns, the most recent of the three, and the second team ever to go 0-16. Unlike the Buccaneers, this wasn't an expansion team, and unlike the Lions, there weren't many clear foundational pieces to build around. Instead, this team was defined by organizational instabilities from top to bottom. On offense, the Browns struggled heavily at quarterback. Rookie DeShone Kizer led the league with 22 interceptions while throwing just 11 touchdowns. The offense consistently stalled, turned the ball over, and failed. But the issues went far beyond just one player. The offensive line struggled, the defense lacked consistency, and the roster overall felt incomplete in almost every phase of the game. Even the front office was unstable. General manager Sashi Brown focused heavily on accumulating draft assets rather than building a competitive roster in the present. That strategy failed to translate into wins, and after a 1-27 stretch as GM, he was fired during the season. The Browns didn't just lose games, they often looked uncompetitive doing it. Their worst loss came against the Houston Texans, a 33-17 defeat, a 17-point loss. While not the biggest blowout amongst these teams, it represented a larger pattern in games where they fell behind and never recovered. What separates the Browns from others is consistency. There were no clear strengths, no stable identity, and no part of the team that was good. Now that we've broken these teams down, it's important to compare them on more than just record. The Buccaneers were an expansion team, their failure was expected, and they were building from scratch. the context matters. The Lions had talent, including a future Hall of Famer in Calvin Johnson, but suffered from historically bad defense and poor execution across the season. The Browns, however, had neither the expansion excuse nor enough talent to offset their instability. They were a modern NFL team with no real direction, no consistency, and no unit that performed at a competitive level. If you compare them in terms of roster stability, organizational direction, consistency of failure, and overall competitiveness, the Browns stand out as the worst team ever. So after breaking down all three teams, the question remains, which is the worst NFL team ever? The Buccaneers were an expansion team learning the league. The Lions were historically bad on defense, but had elite talent. And the Browns were a full organizational breakdown from top to bottom. Because of that, I would say the 2017 Cleveland Browns are the worst team in NFL history. But all three of these teams show something important. Going winless in the NFL is never just about talent. It's about timing, structure, coaching, and sometimes just everything going wrong at once. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching. All sources used will be in the description of this video.